Welcome back to the Buddhist Audio Bookshelf YouTube channel. Today, we continue our reading of Meditation by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, also known as Geoffrey DeGraff. We deeply value your support. Please like and share this audiobook to reach a wider audience, allowing more people to benefit from its wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, ensuring you receive immediate notifications as we upload new content. Together, we can spread the teachings of meditation and mindfulness, fostering a community of enlightenment and inner peace. Thank you for being part of our journey to make these profound teachings accessible to all. Let's start today with reading. Levels of the Breath. August 20, 2006. We all bring our stories to the meditation. Sometimes they're helpful stories, sometimes they're not. Even the Buddha brought his stories to the meditation. That RST knowledge on the night of his awakening was basically his story stretching back over many lifetimes. The big issues in each lifetime were his name, his appearance, his food, his experience of pleasure and pain, and how he passed away. That's pretty much it. The life of living beings. Name, appearance, food, pleasure, pain, death. Not much of a story. And yet we can elaborate these things into all kinds of issues and spend whole lives going over the details, certain incidents in the stories, especially the painful ones. Or we can look back on the pleasures we once had but that we're missing now, which can turn those past pleasures into present pain. The Buddha found two ways to get out of his stories. One was to generalize, to think about all living beings as a whole. That was his second knowledge. The question arose: if he had previous lifetimes, how about other beings? Maybe looking at other beings, he would begin to see some general patterns. And that's precisely what happened. He saw how all beings died and then were reborn, and in taking the larger view he saw an important pattern. The quality of their rebirth was based on their actions, on the quality of their intentions, shaped by their views. From there he went to the third knowledge, which took the pattern he saw in the second knowledge and applied it to the present moment. Looking at his views and his intentions in the present moment, taking them apart. That was how he got out of his stories altogether. So as we meditate, we want to think about the pattern the Buddha found. We've got to get out of our narratives, our stories. Otherwise they drive us crazy. You go through the same old movies over and over again, movies that, if they were put up on the screen, you wouldn't pay to watch. Yet because of the I and the me, my pain, my pleasure, my appearance, my food, you get hooked into watching them over and over again. If you want your meditation to go anywhere, you've got to get yourself over the hook. The RST step is to start generalizing. Think of all the beings in the world who had appearances they didn't like, or food they didn't like, or missed the food that they once had that they did like, or soured both pleasure and pain. You're not the only one. Think about that often. These are situations we all undergo. And the particulars of our appearance and food and pain and pleasure may enthrall us, but you've got to look at the general pattern. When you do, you end that the comings and goings of good and bad, likes and dislikes, start seeming inconsequential. As the general pattern takes the sting or the allure out of your own personal narrative, you can come to the present moment and see more clearly what you're doing in the present moment that's creating pain that doesn't have to be there. What do you have in the present moment? You've got intentions, or in other words, fabrications. What kind of fabrications do you have here? You've got the breath, that's the bodily fabrication. You've got directed thought and evaluation, those are verbal fabrications. And you've got feelings and perceptions and the intentional element fashioning them, that's mental fabrication. These are the things you want to understand. You understand them by learning how to master them, bringing them all together as we're doing right now, when we focus on the breath and approaching their fabrication as a skill. What's the most skillful way to breathe? What's the most skillful way to think about and evaluate your breath? What are the most skillful perceptions to apply to the breath? What kinds of feelings are useful to develop out of the breath? As you get more and more absorbed in these questions, they really help you get out of your narratives. During my RST year as a monk back in Thailand, I had a lot of time by myself, a lot more than you do here. And sure enough, a lot of my old narratives from grade school, high school, college, and my family kept coming back. The one thing that kept me from going crazy was the fact that I had something interesting to explore in the present moment. The breath. As I got more of a handle on the breath, got more absorbed in the breath, the fascination with the old narratives began to wane. The understanding began to arise that if I really wanted to comprehend why I was soaring from those old past narratives, I should try to see how I was causing soaring for myself right now in the present moment. The breath was a good way to explore that. Getting absorbed in the breath is a very important way of getting out of those narratives and into the really big issue. Why are you causing stress and soaring for yourself right now? You're not a passive observer. You're not here watching a TV show that somebody else has pre-packaged. You're actively creating the show. It's an interactive game. So it's important to look at how you think about the breath, how you perceive the breath, and to see the impact those thoughts and perceptions have. This is where Ajahn Lee's instructions on the different levels of breath energy are really helpful. There's the in and out breathing. Then there's the breath energy that courses through the nerves and the blood vessels throughout the body. Then there's the still breath. It's important to realize that all three levels of breath are happening all the time. What you're going to notice depends on which one you focus on, and which one you focus on is going to determine how strong and steady and precise your concentration can be. First, you work with the in and out breath, which is the easiest to observe and can get the mind to a certain level of concentration, but the in and out breath can take you only so far. You're still changing from in to out, and you may have a sense that the in breath is something very different from the out breath. So you're watching two things. But then if you start getting more and more in touch with the process of spreading of the breath energy through the blood vessels and the nerves, that gives you something you can watch continuously, with no switching from in to out, for this level of energy is always there. Your perception can become steadier. At RST it's not all that steady because you're exploring. This is directed thought and evaluation. You're exploring how the breath energy affects different parts of the body. Which parts you tense up as you breathe in, which parts you squeeze as you breathe out. Then you work through those parts, section by section, clearing out the tension, and trying to keep it cleared out throughout the breath cycle. Sometimes, as you get one section cleared up, a section that you just cleared up a few minutes ago starts tensing up again. It's like the old Thai proverb about throwing live crabs into a basket. You throw one or two into the basket. Then you look for your third, but by the time you throw the third one in, the RST crabs crawled out. So again, this stage of the meditation is fairly active. There's a lot of directed thought, a lot of evaluation, and they have to go back and forth over the same territory many times. But the important point is that you're consistently with issues of the breath. That's what enables you to be in a state of concentration. Even though there's some activity, even though there's some moving around, it's within a prescribed area. You've withdrawn from unskillful qualities, withdrawn from sensual passions, and you're right here with all the complexities of the breath energy in the body. As you work through the complexities, things begin to hook up, and after a while they stay hooked up, connected into a single eld of energy. That's when the perception of breath can get more unit-ed. As it grows more unit-ed, the issues are less complex. You're concerned less and less with the in and out breathing, and more with the state of the breath energy owing through the body. You may notice that the breath channels in the body seem to expand as you breathe in. They may seem to contract as you breathe out. This is where you've got to make up your mind to keep them open all the time, both with the in-breath and with the out, so that it's just open breath channels open all the time. That can be your one perception. You don't have to think about in and out. Just everything open. By this time you should have noticed where the different nodes of breath energy are, the ones that are like road intersections that can get closed. You can close the whole road just by closing the one intersection. But at the same time, once you've got the intersection open, you've got the whole road open. So focus your attention on the intersections and try to keep them open all the time. That's what Ajahn Lee is pointing to when he talks about the resting spots of the breath. Say you're focused in the middle of the chest. Keep that sense of the middle of the chest wide open all the way through the in-breath, all the way through the out, and then think of that sense of openness spreading throughout the body, wherever it's going to go. Get in touch with the awareness that already LLS the body as well, so you're thinking, all the way open, all the way in, all the way out, and the in and out become less and less important while the openness that's continuous takes center stage. With that perception you can get the mind to a much more solid level of concentration. Just maintain that one perception. There will still be some in and out breathing, but it grows more and more subtle and impinges less and less on your awareness. This is how you can get more in touch with that sense of the really still breath that's not affected by any in or out at all. No sense of motion at all. Just there, ling the body. So this element of perception, this mental fabrication, has a really important role in how you relate to the present moment. As you learn to fabricate in more subtle ways, more solid ways, more unchanging and unit ways, the mind can settle down more and more solidly, securely. Some people, when they get to this stage, think that the mind isn't doing anything at all. No self, no actor, nothing. But actually it's doing just one consistent thing. When there's that one consistent thing, you don't notice the motions. The sense of the actor gets less and less prominent in the mind because there's no changing of roles, nothing to thwart your role. There's just a sense of being, just being here. But being here is still an activity, it's still a fabrication. Nevertheless, it's a skillful fabrication. It's part of your path. This is how you begin to understand fabrications. By mastering the fabrications that give you a sense of ease and well-being in the present moment, that allow the mind to settle down. Once it's settled down, it can see the subtleties a lot more clearly. So work on getting the mind in the right position, right here, right now. At this point, your stories and narratives are far away because you've got something really fascinating in the present moment. You see it. You approach the present moment with the right skills, and they really do make a huge difference in the amount of pleasure you get out of it. And that's an important insight right there. The 4 jhanas. January 30, 2009. As you sit here with your eyes closed, where do you feel the breathing? You may feel it in lots of places in the body, because the breath isn't just the air coming in and out of the lungs. It's an energy out. It's part of the breath element that LLS the entire body. Your sense of the body sitting here, the whole body from the head down to the feet, has a breath aspect. Part of that breath is the in and out breath, and another part is simply the energy owing in the nerves, in the blood vessels, out to the pores of the skin. It's all breath. So as you breathe in and out, you have the right to sense it anywhere at all. You can focus either on the spot where the breath seems most prominent, or on the spot where it simply seems most natural to focus. Some people find it easiest to focus on the head, others find it easier to focus on the chest, the neck, or the shoulders. So focus anywhere you'd like. And allow the spot where you're focusing to have a certain amount of freedom. In other words, don't clamp down on it. Sometimes you may try to do things sharply. This is where the in-breath begins, this is where the out-breath begins, this is where the in-breath ends, this is where the out-breath ends. But doing that places unnecessary restrictions on your breathing. Given that the whole body is a body of breath energy doesn't come with clear lines or sharp demarcations. When you breathe in, the incoming energy simply melds with the old energy. It doesn't it doesn't have to be pushed against anything. It just zooses and energizes what's already there. There's no clear line of demarcation. When the in-breath reaches a point where you feel you've had enough incoming energy, the breath goes out. So try not to impose too many strict preconceived notions on the breath. Just watch how the process feels and hold that perception in mind. that the whole body is a held of breath energy, and the in-breath is simply charging up the breath energy already there. Then when things feel too charged, you allow the breath to go out. When it's going to start coming in again, that's its business. You're just there to watch it. To use the Thai word Ajahn Fuang would use, pracking, hover around it, look after it, make sure it feels good. You can pose some questions in the mind. What kind of breathing would feel better right now? What kind of breathing would feel best? Which part of the body needs more breath energy? And see how the body responds. Just hover around the breath like this. The hovering around. That's directed thought and evaluation. As long as your hovering can stay with the breath and doesn't hover over to other places, you've got the third factor for RST jhana, which is singleness of preoccupation. The singleness here meaning both that it's the one topic you're interested in and that, as you work with it, it becomes more and more the one thing ling the whole body, your whole range of awareness. You're working on a very broad-based state of concentration here. As the Buddha says, when a feeling of ease and rapture arises, you try to spread it throughout the whole body. The image he gives is of a bathman or a bathman's apprentice kneading water into a pile of bath powder. In those days they didn't have soap. The bathman would start with some scented bath powder and then mix it with water, kneading the water into the powder until it formed a paste with which they'd bathe. It's similar to mixing water with or to make bread dough. You want to mix it just right and knead it through thoroughly so that all the air gets moistened in the same way. You don't add so much water that the water begins to dribble out, or so little that not all the air gets moistened. That's what directed thought and evaluation are for. They're not extraneous to the RST jhana. They're part of the process of arranging a good place for the mind to settle down. They help attain, someplace in the body, a balanced feeling of ease and refreshment, and then allow that ease and refreshment to LL the body, to knead it through the body if necessary, so that the whole body feels saturated and led. With ease and refreshment, with breath, with awareness. You'll notice that awareness has two aspects. There's focused awareness, and then there's a kind of background awareness already in your body. You want to get them in touch with each other. The background awareness is already there, just like the background breath energy in the body. The question in both cases, though, is it full? When dealing with the breath, you're not trying to pump breath into areas where it's never been before. You're simply allowing everything to connect. And the same with your awareness. You want your focused awareness to connect with your background awareness so that they form a solid whole. Now as you work with this, you may end after a while that everything is as saturated as it can get. No matter how much you try to make it more comfortable, it just doesn't seem to change. At that point you can just settle in with the breathing as it is, keeping your awareness centered in full. You gain a sense more and more that the breath and the awareness become one. Because, after all, they're linked the same place. The awareness LLS the body, the breath LLS the body, each LLS the other, and they become one. The stronger the sense of oneness, the further and further away the hindrances go. They may nibble at the edges of your awareness here and there, but you really don't have to pay them any attention. You don't have to chase them away. If you chase them away, you drop the breath and they've got you. So you don't want them to trick you in that way. Whatever thought comes passing by, just let it go passing by. But the greater the sense of unity or unication here, the less the hindrances are going to be a problem. That right there is enough to get you solidly based. From there the concentration can develop further. You may decide that the sense of rapture and refreshment is too coarse, that it actually becomes an irritant. You'd like something more rened and still. So tune into the area where there already is stillness in the awareness, where there already is stillness in the breath, and let the rapture do its thing. You don't have to play along with it anymore. You go under the radar, below the rapture, into a level of more subtle ease. Relaxed and equanimous. In the canon the distinction between these two levels is described in terms of two different images. One is of a lake fed by a cool spring. That's the second jhana. There's a sense of upwelling, a movement of the waters. The cool water from the spring spreads to the whole lake effortlessly. There's no conscious effort, unlike the image of the bathman, who is deliberately working the water through the bath powder dough. Here the cool water just naturally spreads throughout the lake. But still there's a spreading, a sense of upwelling movement and refreshment. In the image for the third jhana, though, the waters of the lake are totally still. Lotuses are growing totally submersed in the water, from the tips of the roots up to the tips of the oars. No movement at all. Just the coolness of the water saturating them. As things get more and more connected, even the subtle movement of the breath in and out grows still. The awareness is still. The breath is still. Both the body with their stillness. This is the fourth jhana. In the image of this jhana, the water disappears altogether. There's just a light, white cloth covering the body. The equanimity here weighs less than the pleasure you've been soaking in, and your awareness throughout the body is very clear. This is when your concentration is really strong. It's not the kind of concentration that blots out other things. It's just there. You've got the perception that gently but steadily holds it there. The world outside is still around you, but you don't send your awareness out to it. You stay with the sense of stillness in the breath, stillness in the body, stillness in the awareness. There's a great sense of freedom, although there's still the subtle work of staying here. You don't want to drop it. But it's not nearly as complex as the earlier stages of concentration. Getting the mind to settle down like this is like a mother hen trying to gather her chicks together. In the beginning, the chicks are running all over the place. The hen has to run here and there to round them up, but gradually she brings them into a smaller and smaller range until finally, they all settle down together under her wings. That's the way it is with concentration. You're not trying to blot out anything, you just maintain your focus and gather everything in. The closer these things come together, the less effort involved in keeping tabs on them. Another image they use in Thailand is of a red ant. The red ant, when it bites, just grabs on with its jaws. It doesn't let go. You can pull at its body, but the jaws stay in place even when its head is torn off. So all you have to do is gather all your attention on the perception and sensation of the breath throughout the body, and then just hang on. If you do it skillfully, with this enlarged awareness, you settle down and develop a sense of concentration that's easy to maintain. If everything is focused just on one point, that concentration will easily be destroyed with the slightest movement. You may be able to maintain it when you're sitting very still, but as soon as you have to move the body, it's gone. But with the whole body awareness like this, where there's a sense of being settled and established with the entire body or frame, your center of gravity is low. The mind is broadly based and isn't easily tipped over. Even as you get up from the meditation, you can maintain that sense of full body as you walk around, as you deal with other things. It may not actually qualify as jhana, but it's a steady foundation. It's your foundation of mindfulness. It's an establishing of mindfulness, which after all is the theme or nimitta of the meditation. When the Buddha used the word nimitta, he didn't mean a vision or a light. He meant the topic of your meditation. And the topic of your meditation is what? It's the four satipatthana. The body in and of itself, feelings in and of themselves, mind in and of itself, or mental qualities in and of themselves, all of which are right here. It doesn't take much to move from body to feelings, or feelings to mind states, or mind states to mental qualities. They're very close together right here. But you choose one as your primary foundation or frame of reference. For instance, try to relate everything to the breath. As feelings come and go, see how they relate to the breath. How does the breath cause them? Which way of breathing helps to induce feelings of ease and rapture? When the ease and rapture seem to be coarse, which ways of breathing or conceiving of the breath allow everything to settle down into a more subtle state of equanimity? Which ways of breathing allow you to gain what the Buddha called an enlarged awareness, Mahagatam Siddham? In the foundations of mindfulness or the frames of reference, he talks about different ways of categorizing the mind. As you read through the list, you see that the categories get more and more re-net as your concentration gets more and more re-net. So which ways of breathing help the mind get more rened? In terms of mental qualities, which ways of breathing are associated with the hindrances, which ways of breathing are associated with the factors for awakening? For example, the RST3 factors mindfulness, the analysis of qualities, and persistence are related to your directed thought and evaluation, trying to see what's skillful and what's not, trying to induce what's skillful and let go of what's not. How do you use the breath to develop these factors in such a way that gathers the remaining qualities rapture and refreshment, calm, concentration and equanimity here in the stages of concentration? You want to hold on to the breath as your main frame of reference so that you don't get scattered. If you ND yourself getting scattered, just drop those connections and stay simply with the sensation of the breath. Learn how to read your mind, to see when the mind is ready to start investigating these connections, and when it really needs to just sit down and be still. Stay with the one perception that acts as a thread, keeps the mind right here, sews your awareness together with the body. You're creating a place where insight can arise. It requires a good solid foundation, a low center of gravity, so that it's not easily knocked over. If you it around from one frame of reference to another, you miss a lot of things, because in the itting around there are going to be gaps. A lot of interesting things happen in the gaps, which you tend to miss. So think of your mindfulness of the breath as a long piece of thread that sews everything together over time. Anything that comes up in the body or in the mind, try to relate it to the breath. This is the kind of concentration that can provide a good foundation for insight, for discernment. Its range of view is all around, with few blind spots. The stronger this concentration, the more rened the discernment you can develop. So don't worry about when to stop doing concentration and to start doing discernment work. As the Buddha said, it requires a certain amount of tranquility and insight in order to get the mind to settle down into strong concentration. Then once it's in strong concentration, your tranquility and insight get more rened. These things go together. You may ND yourself leaning in one direction or another at any one time, but don't lean so hard that things tip over or get scattered. Try to keep everything together like this. The mind can then begin to cut through a lot of dilemmas, a lot of problems in a way that it couldn't when it was scattered. Ajahn Lee gives the image of gathering everything into a single drill bit that drills down into the earth in one place. Your concentration is here. Your mindfulness is here. Your insight is here. When they're all working together, the drill bit can go deep and cut through anything, even rock, because all these qualities are working together. Knowing the body from within. December 23, 2008. As you're meditating and listening to the Dhamma talk, give most of your attention to the breath, to your actual meditation object. The talk is here in the background, pointing things out that may or may not be appearing right now in your breath, in your mind. The actual Dhamma is right there in the body, in the mind. It's not in the words of the talk. One of the Pali terms for a Dhamma talk, Dhammadesana, literally means pointing to the Dhamma. In other words, the words aren't the Dhamma. The words point to the Dhamma that can be found in the breath, in the mind, in this area of awareness where you experience the body from within. There's an old Peanuts comic strip where Linus comes up to Lucy and says, "Feel how cold my hands are." So he touches her and she says, "Brrr, yes, they are cold." Then she asks, "But how do you know how they feel when you're inside them?" And this is a big problem for most of us. We're not really that conscious of how we feel the body from within. Yet this is the area where the Buddha says you're going to ND the Dhamma. The texts talk about touching the Dhamma with the body, even seeing the Dhamma with the body. Where you're experiencing the body right now. That's where the important things are going to be discovered. The experience of concentration is going to be sensed right here. Even when you go into the formless realms, it's going to be right here where your sense of the surface of the body begins to disappear. Right where the body was felt, that's where you're going to start noticing space and consciousness. When your awareness of the deathless comes, it's going to LL the area where your body is now. That's where the Dhamma is seen and touched. So right here is where you want to look. And get used to looking again and again and again, so that you can see things more precisely and accurately. Now, words are useful to help you to discern and distinguish some of the things you might be experiencing here. It's like people who are trained to be professional tasters. Part of their training lies in learning how to notice very carefully what their taste buds are telling them, but an equally large part is learning a vocabulary that helps them make precise distinctions. This is the purpose of these words pointing to the Dhamma. To help you notice subtle things happening right here that you might have overlooked or glommed together. You might have missed some subtle distinctions. When most of us look at this sense of the inside of the body, we can notice whether we're feeling well or not well, but that's about it. Some people can't even experience that much, can't even experience the body. Either because of abuse when they were small or some other trauma, they have trouble feeling their bodies, being sensitive to what's going on inside. One way to get around that is not to imagine that you're looking at the body from the area of the head or the eyes. Instead, back up into the body. Notice how the back feels, notice how the different parts of the body feel as you back into them. And use the breath as your guide. Think of the different aspects you notice in the body as an aspect of the breath energy. Altogether, there are 4 elements or properties that make up our sense of the body from within: breath, water, and earth. The sense of energy, which can be either moving or else still, but buzzing is breath. Don't think of the breath only as the air coming in and out of the lungs. It's the energy buzz throughout the body. When you start thinking of the body as an energy hour, energy buzz, you begin to notice parts of the body where the buzz is not quite right. You might have accepted them in the past as feeling solid, thinking, well, that's where the bones are. That's where the muscles are tight. But if you tell yourself, this is breath, you realize that some parts of the breath seem to be stuck, others are stagnant. They don't move. They don't ow. What can you do to get them to move? What can you do to get them to ow? Changing your perception will also change your questions, change your ideas of what's possible. Then there's the warmth, the property. Sometimes it seems too warm, sometimes not warm enough. Which parts of the body are warmest right now? Do they feel comfortable or overly warm? If they feel comfortable, think of spreading that warmth throughout the body, to the places that are cooler. If you're feeling too hot, you want to do the opposite. Look for the cool areas and think of the coolness spreading throughout the body. That's the water, coming in to dampen the earth is a sense of solidity or heaviness. Does the body feel too heavy, or do you feel too lightheaded? Can you bring things into balance? If you're feeling too heavy, think more of lightness, the breath energy lifting you up. If you're feeling too lightheaded, think more of earth. There are bones, there's all the solid stew in your body that can keep you grounded. Once you've been able to detect these different properties within the body, the next step is to try to bring them all into balance, so that things are not too warm, not too cold, not too heavy, not too light. They feel just right. When the body is brought into balance, your sense of the breath is going to change. The energy out in the body becomes less and less a matter of having to pull energy in from without. It's more that the pores of your skin are wide open, and they connect with breath channels throughout the body. Different parts of the body are nourished with breath energy, and all you have to do is think of them sharing the breath energy with one another, with other parts of the body that seem more starved. The more the breath channels connect within the body, the less you're going to need the in and out breath. This is important because the more things come to balance and stillness like this, the more clearly you'll be able to see what the mind is doing right here, and particularly the very peculiar activity that the mind has of taking a sensation in the body and using it as a kernel for a thought. It becomes a little symbol in the mind, and then the symbol turns into a thought world. The more quiet and balanced things are in the body, the more clearly you will be able to see this happen and how arbitrary the whole process is. Of course, this process does have its uses. It enables you to think and function in the world. But you also want to be able to pull yourself out at any time, in case a thought world turns vicious, so it's good to gain practice in just staying with the body. Think of body, keeping the body in and of itself as your frame of reference. If a thought does arise, and you can sense where in the body it's lodged, think of breathing through that spot. Or just think of the energy in that spot untangling itself and getting connected with the energy of the different parts right around it, dissolving the tangle. When you can stay with the sense of the body and not get sucked into a thought world, it's called keeping the body in and of itself as your frame of reference. This is why the Buddha starts here when he teaches mindfulness. And in teaching mindfulness, he teaches you the themes of concentration. You want to maintain a sense of being centered right here where you're aware of the body from within, so that as the movements of the mind go ashing out, you can see them, and yet not ride along with them. That's how you begin to understand things like greed, anger, delusion, craving, and all those other mental states that cause Zuering learning, how to watch how they form, and how not to get hoodwinked into running along with them. But this requires becoming more and more sensitive to how things are happening here in the body, how the mind and the different properties of the body interact. When you ND yourself in a bad mood, don't immediately focus on how bad things are outside. Don't focus on the object of the mood, focus instead on the mood itself, realizing that it comes from something wrong with how the mind and the body are interacting. Learn to look inside and not take the mind's comments on the world outside so seriously. Again and again, this is the message of the meditation. You want to put yourself in a position where you can watch these processes as processes, rather than as reliable information about the world out there. The realization becomes clearer and clearer that everything you know about the world out there is being altered through this area of your experience, the area we're all not very clear about, not very articulate about, not very observant about. Which means, of course, that we're going to get deluded by the information the mind puts together. The way to get past that delusion is to get more and more clear about this clearinghouse, the area where you're aware of the body from within. This is where everything important is going to appear. If you don't yet see anything happening here, then you're not looking carefully enough. Everything that's going to shape your life has to go through this altar. You want to get to know the altering process very well, so you can recognize when it's altering things in an accurate and useful way, and when it's altering them in a harmful way that gives rise to Zuering. So we focus on the breath not simply as a means for getting the mind to settle down and be still, but also as a means for looking at the mind itself and gaining insight. And the insight we're gaining here is not so much an insight that you can put into words. The words help you to articulate some of what you're experiencing here, but the actual Dhamma is going to appear right here in your inner sense of the body and immediately make sense in a non-verbal way. This is why it's so important that you get sensitive to this area and that you're continually sensitive to this area, without rushing in, rushing out, rushing in, rushing out. You're going to stay right here. If there's any rushing in and out, you can watch it, but you're not going to rush along with it. That's how you learn how to see things, to see through things, so they lose their power over you. As you get more and more sensitive here, ultimately you'll arrive at the point where you do touch the Dhamma with the body. You see the Dhamma with the body, i.e., you see it where the body is right now. It's a very intimate kind of seeing. Actually, a lot of the Dhamma is already here right now. A lot of the processes of the body, the processes of the mind, can be sensed from within. But if you're not looking here, if you're not looking continually, or you're not looking sensitively from this perspective, you're going to miss them. So try to be continuous in your sensitivity. Make this your frame of reference, stick with this frame of reference, and you'll come to see a lot of things you never saw before. They were happening here all along, but you were distracted. You were carried along by the ow. This is why the Buddha calls the things that dull the mind asavas, eons, things that go owing out. For all too long we've allowed ourselves to be carried along with the ow, and then end up deposited wherever the ow ends, in the mud and mess of the Mississippi Delta. But now you want to take a stance right here. The Buddha said, make the body in and of itself your island in the middle of the river, so as the ow goes out, you don't go owing along with it. You get to see, oh, These are the things that get carried along with the ow. This is where the ow goes. As long as you're standing on the island, you aren't getting sucked into the ow. You aren't getting diluted. You can see what's happening and let it go. This is why it's so important that you take your stance here and that you maintain this stance in all your other activities. Right concentration. December 27, 2007. I don't know if you've noticed when we chant the sutta, the analysis of the path as we did last night, that the longest section is the one describing right concentration. It's the only section that talks about stages in the practice. And it gives a fairly detailed map of the different elements in each stage. The question is, how do we relate to the map? It's tempting to say, well, there's this ingredient, there's that ingredient, and so you pull the different ingredients together and hope that what you've got is a state of jhana. But it doesn't really work that way. It's like being told that durian tastes a little bit like garlic, a little bit like onions, a little bit like custard. It has a little bit of cyanide, a little bit of vitamin E. So you throw all those things together, thinking that you're going to get durian, but what you get is an inedible mess. If you want to get durian, you have to plant the seed. Here the seed is the topic of the meditation. The topic, as the Buddha said, is the 4 establishings of mindfulness. For example, staying focused on the body in and of itself, ardent, alert and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. That's what you focus on, the process you focus on. Once you've planted the seed and keep watering the seed, the tree will grow. When it's mature, the tree will start giving fruit. If you've planted the right seed, you're going to get the right fruit. So you don't have to go designing the fruit. You just have to be very careful to plant the right seed and care for it well. So focus on the breath in and of itself. As you're focusing on the breath, put aside any sensual passions. There's the phrase in the description of jhana, secluded from sensuality. Some people interpret that as meaning totally cut off from any input from the physical senses. Some interpret it as meaning secluded from sensual pleasures, so that you have to meditate in a place that's unpleasant or a place that's very boring. But neither of those interpretations is what the Buddha means. Sensuality, in his sense of the word, is your passion for your sensual thoughts and plans, the extent to which you love to obsess about those things. So in being secluded from sensuality, you're not trying to close any contact with outside senses, and you're not trying to put yourself in a dull, boring place. You're trying to develop a more internal seclusion. If you see any sensual passion coming up, you sidestep it. You put it aside. Right here is where the analysis of the body into different parts comes in handy. If there's anything in the body that's got you lusting for it, you can think about all the other things right next to it in the body that are disgusting. If you're feeling some greed for food, think about the whole process of getting and eating food. Exactly how much work goes into preparing the food, how short a time it actually tastes good in the mouth, and then what it's like as it goes through the digestive system and comes out the other end. In other words, you're using some thinking here to protect yourself, to pull you away from unskillful thoughts, and in particular from sensual passion. Another way of gaining seclusion from sensuality is to fully inhabit your sense of the body. This is what rupa, or form, means when you're in concentration. The sense of the body is felt from within. You feel the inside of your hands, the inside of your feet, the inside of everything. The mind isn't living out in the world with its thoughts about sights or sounds or smells or tastes or things that come and touch the body. You want to be on the level of form. The body in and of itself is it's present to you right here from the inside right now. And as you're alert and mindful, you're ardent. You want to use your alertness and mindfulness in a skillful way. In other words, notice how the breath feels and ask yourself, is this the kind of breath sensation you could settle down and spend lots of time with? If it's not, what can you do to change it? This is where evaluation comes in. The image for the RST jhana is of a bathman working water through his lump of bath powder and turning it into a kind of dough. Of the different images used for the jhanas, this is the only one with a conscious agent deliberately doing something and evaluating the results. You're ending a sense of pleasure and fullness with the breath, and then you deliberately work it through the body as a whole, evaluating the results as you go along. In doing so, you'll learn an awful lot about this sense of the form of the body and how the energy moves through it and around it. How the energy can move in a comfortable way and how, if you force it in the wrong way, it gets very uncomfortable. You have to observe and learn what works and what doesn't. In this way you're not only developing a nice place to be in the present moment, but also learning about how the different aggregates such as the aggregate of feeling and the aggregate of form interact, how your perception has an effect on these things. You'll see how you come to the meditation with specific perceptions in mind, a particular idea in mind of how the mind focuses itself, of how the breath works, of how the energy in one part of the body relates to the energy in another part of the body. As you meditate, you get a chance to test those perceptions. If they're not working, try out other perceptions. All of this is evaluation. When you've got the right focal point, you're evaluating it properly, and you're keeping a specific topic in mind as continually as you can. You've got all the causal factors that can get you into right concentration. Then you don't have to think about anything else. You don't have to ask yourself, do I need to add a little bit more rapture, a little bit more pleasure? If you've got the causes right, the results will come on their own. The rapture and pleasure are results. If you aren't getting the right results, focus back on the causes, which are directed thought, evaluation, and singleness of preoccupation. When these are right, the pleasure will come as a sense of ease, whereas the rapture can come in many different forms. In some cases it's simply a sense of refreshment, of lightness or fullness in the body. Other times it's more intense. A sense of thrill running through the body, or your hair standing on end. Again, your main concern is to stick with the causes. You don't want to go out redesigning the fruit, painting the fruit, squeezing the fruit, or pulling on it. Focus on the causes, and the fruit will mature on its own. Then there's always the question. How do you know you've hit the RST jhana? You can't really know at RST. It doesn't come with a sign that says, now entering jhana. When you end the mind in a state that feels really good, really comfortable, with a sense of coming home, then when you leave it, put a post-it note on it. This might be something important. In other words, you apply a label to it, but at the same time you realize you're not yet really familiar with the territory, so you don't want to be too quick to incise the label in marble. The only one of the jhanas that has a really denied signpost is the fourth, which is where the in and out breathing stops. There's a sense of awareness ling the body, and it's all very still. The mind is still, the body is still, and everything's perfectly balanced. There's no in and out breathing at all. At that point you know you've hit the fourth jhana, and you can put a more condensed note there. Then you can look back at the various stages you've been through, and you might have to rearrange the notes a little bit. Or that you've taken more than 4 steps coming in. There are passages in the canon that talk about these stages in jhana practice, others that talk about 3. So it's possible that your path into the 4th jhana might not have the same number of steps as somebody else's. I noticed that when Ajahn Fuang was teaching his students, different people would have all sorts of different experiences in the meditation, until they got to that one point where everything was very still in the body. The in and out breathing nearly stopped. Breath energy was ling the body, awareness was ling the body, everything felt very connected, balanced, and very bright. Not necessarily with a light, but with a sense of real clarity. Then from that point on everybody seemed to go through the same stages. But the process of getting into that point is going to be a very individual thing. The important factor is that you end a meditation topic you really like. There's got to be an element of delight here because you're trying to develop a state of becoming, a healthy state of becoming, an alternative to the unhealthy and unskillful states of becoming you've been engaged in before. And an important component in becoming is delight. With right concentration you have to develop a strong sense of ease and well-being. That's the only way you're going to be able to pull yourself away from the temptation to keep falling back to the sensual delight that feeds your old sensual indulgences. The Buddha once said that even though you may have a right understanding about the drawbacks of sensuality, if you haven't had any access to the kind of pleasure and rapture that jhana can provide, you're always going to be tempted to go back. So mere insight on its own is not enough to pull you away from those temptations. You need something else. Something stronger and more visceral, to provide the mind with a sense of well-being. This is what right concentration provides. There's a nice sutta in which the Buddha talks about a bull elephant who wants to go down to the river and bathe alone. When he lives with an elephant herd and goes down to the river, the she-elephants and baby elephants bump into him. He wants to drink clear water and of course, they've muddied up the river. So he decides to go on his own. Then, as he's living alone, when he goes down to the river, the water is clear. Nobody is bumping into him as he bathes. He comes out, breaks a twig of the tree, and scratches himself with the twig. He ends satisfaction. He allays his itch. The Buddha said that this is the same as when you practice right concentration. You gain a sense of seclusion, and then the pleasure, the rapture, and the sense of equanimity are like scratching yourself with the twig. It feels good. It allays your itch. And that's an important part of the practice. Without that sense of ease and well-being, everything gets very dry. At the same time, once the mind is satisfied in this way, you get to see the activities of the mind really clearly, you get to see the body really clearly, because you are here. Very consistently here, alert, mindful. Then you begin to see the body and your mind in terms of the aggregates in action. You see form, i.e., the form you're inhabiting. You see feelings, the feelings that come from the different ways the breath energy moves through the body. You see your perceptions in action, your fabrications in action. For instance, when you move from the RST to the second jhana, you let go of verbal fabrication, and your relationship to the breath changes. Singleness of preoccupation is a factor of all the levels of jhana, but when you get into the second jhana, the Buddha uses a new term, unication. In unication, it feels as if your awareness and the breath become one. It's not as if you're sitting outside of the breath kneading it through the body, you're immersed in a lake with the cool water of a spring welling up inside. You're actually one with the breath. You don't have to adjust it anymore, you don't have to evaluate it anymore. Things begin to meld together, merge together, and actually stay that way all the way up through the dimension of the initude of consciousness. This is what happens when you let go of the verbal fabrication of directed thought and evaluation. When you get to the fourth jhana, you let go of bodily fabrication. The in and out breath actually stops. There are two ways you can observe the mind in the course of practicing jhana. One is as it's in a particular state of jhana. In fact, all the way up through the dimension of nothingness, you can observe each state while you're in it. It's like having your hand in a glove. It can be fully in the glove, partly in the glove, or totally removed. When you're fully in the higher jhanas you can't observe them, but when you're partly in them, you can. You pull the mind slightly above its full absorption but not totally out so that you can observe what's going on in that particular state. Another way to observe it is, as you move from one level to the next, you begin to see different fabrications, different perceptions, just peeling away. So you're beginning to see exactly what the Buddha is talking about when he talks about the V-aggregates. You see them in action for they are actions. You see the distinctions among them. You also see how they interact, which means that you're not only in a really nice shady place with a branch that you can use to scratch yourself anywhere you itch. You're also in an ideal place to watch what's going on right here in the present moment in terms of the aggregates. This allows you to start looking at things in and of themselves as they come into being right here, right now. This is why right concentration is the heart of the path. It's the RST element of the path that the Buddha discovered. You probably know the story. He'd gone to the extreme end of self-addiction through the various austerities he had enacted on himself, and after 6 years he realized that this wasn't working. In spite of all his investment in that particular path, he had the good sense and the humility to realize that there must be another way. So at that point he hearkened back to the time when he was a child sitting under a tree, and had entered the RST jhana. The question arose in his mind. Could this be the path? And he said, yes, this is the path. So, right concentration is the factor that RST realized was part of the path. Then from that point on, as he worked with it, he began to realize that other factors had to support it as well. But right concentration is the central one, the one you can't do without. And the time spent on developing right concentration is very well spent. Both because it's a good place to stay and because it's an ideal place to start seeing things in terms of the V aggregates. So you keep it in the back of your mind that this is what you want in the practice, this is where you're headed as an interim goal on the path. But as with every aspect of the path, you have to combine your desire for a particular goal with an understanding of the steps that will take you there. As the canon says, desire for awakening is a good thing. But it's a good thing only when it gets you to focus on the actual steps that will take you there. And the same principle applies to jhana. You know in the back of your mind that this is where you're headed, but you can't be obsessed with what's written on the map. You have to be more obsessed with the causes. That will get you there. You seclude the mind from sensuality. And where do you do that? By focusing on the 4 frames of reference, the 4 establishings of mindfulness. The Buddha says that this is your territory as a meditator. If you wander over your territory, it's like the quail who wandered away from the plowed eld where he could hide from the hawk. He suddenly NDS himself out in an open meadow where a hawk swoops down and catches him. As the hawk carries him over, he laments his bad fate. Ah, I shouldn't have left my safe eld. If I hadn't, this hawk would have been no match for me. The hawk says, okay, I'll let you go there, but even there you won't escape me. He lets the quail go. The quail goes and stands on top of a stone turned up by the plow and shouts to the hawk, okay, come and get me, you hawk. Come and get me, you hawk. And the hawk, without bragging, just folds his wings and dives down. The quail sees that the hawk is coming at him full speed and so jumps behind a stone. The hawk crashes into the stone and dies. This is the analogy for when you wander over into sensual passions. You're out where the hawk can get you. But when you're here in the body, ardent, alert, and mindful, you're in your safe territory. Just keep inhabiting the body as you go through the day. Whether you're in jhana or not doesn't matter. As long as you have this sense of fully inhabiting the body, being in touch with the breath energy in the body, you're in the right location, you're in the proper territory. As for the map of the Dhyaran stages, keep that in the back of your mind. If you look at the map while you're driving, you'll drive over the road. Use the map after you've come out of meditation to react on what you experienced, what happened in the course of the meditation. Over time you'll arrive at your own more complete map of the Dhyaran stages the mind goes through, the Dhyaran ways it settles down, the Dhyaran types of concentration you can get into. But all this comes from having a proper sense of cause and effect. This is why the Buddha put right view at the very beginning of the path. Seeing the practice of meditation as a type of karma, something you do to get the results that you want, with the realization that the results have to come from causes. If you focus on the causes, with the sense of where you want to go kept in the back of the mind, the causes will take you there. In this case, it's not done by focusing on your memory of what was stated in the texts about jhana. It's done by focusing on the breath, getting to know the breath by evaluating it, adjusting it, settling in. That's where you see right concentration. In keeping with the Buddha's teachings, we underscore the profound significance of disseminating wisdom extensively. Today, we've converted this voluminous 1,000-page tome into an easily accessible audio format. Now, the responsibility to further this noble cause rests with you. Through your subscriptions, likes, and content shares, you play a pivotal role in the widespread distribution of these teachings, benefiting countless others. Let's uphold the age-old tradition of sharing knowledge and fostering mindfulness for the greater good of humanity. We invite you to join us in this mission, and together, we can create a profound impact on the lives of many.